Hey, before you start, this episode includes mentions of rape, murder, and suicide. Please take care when listening. It's the middle of the night. Well, early in the morning, really. And 16-year-old David Milgaard is on a road trip with some friends. They're headed west. First, they need to stop in Saskatchewan to pick up a guy they call Shorty. But on this night, January 31st, 1969, the weather is brutal. Minus 41 degrees brutal. There's ice fog. They get lost. Their car gets stuck on the ice. Things aren't off to a great start. On that same early morning, not far from where all of this is happening, a 20-year-old nurse's aide named Gail Miller is getting ready for her day. She's moved from her family's farm to a rooming house. She's living in town to pursue her career. One day she wants to care for babies. She puts on her white uniform, her black coat. It's still dark out as she leaves for the bus, but she never makes it.
In tonight's news, the police investigation into the Gail Miller murder continues. The 20-year-old nursing assistant was killed early in the morning on January...
It's a shocking crime, a young life lost, and no one can know it at the time, but this violent act will upend David's life too. I'm Falen Johnson, and this is See You in Court, a podcast about the cases that changed Canada. Today, part one of the murder case against David Milgaard and how it shook the country's faith in our justice system. Laura Lynch is bringing us today's story. She reported on it when it ended up at the Supreme Court. Laura, let's start from the beginning. Can you tell me a little bit more about David?
Sure. David is the firstborn child in a typical 50s nuclear family in small-town Saskatchewan. As a kid, he's all curls and cuteness, according to his mom. And in his teens, he's good-looking and charming, and he soon earns a nickname from his buddies. Hoppy, because he hops in and out of so many girls' beds. His younger sister, Susan, adores him. Looking back decades later, she remembers him as her John Wayne.
Very loyal, honest, strong. I felt like he was my protector in many ways. He wasn't fond of school.
School was not for David. His mother, Joyce, says he was always in trouble. He's impulsive, a show-off, but never violent. His parents try a few options, including 3 months at a psychiatric center for kids. But by grade 9, he drops out altogether.
So he's left school. What happens after that?
Well, in some ways, David fits right into the 1960s hippie lifestyle. He likes to party, he smokes pot, but he gets a job selling magazine subscriptions, and his mom says he's good at it. He wants to head to BC to try his hand there. And that is how he ends up on that fateful journey to Saskatoon in January of 1969. It turns out that his buddy Shorty's place, where he's visiting, is a block and a half from the spot where Gail Miller's body is found. She's been raped, stabbed 14 times, and left in a snowbank. It's a horrible crime. It makes news headlines. But David and his friends leave town that same day with no idea what's happened. A few months after the murder, David finds out police have talked to the friends he was with that day, including Shorty. And now police want to speak with him. He tells his mom he's not worried because he didn't do anything wrong and he just wants to cooperate and clear things up. So David turns himself into the RCMP. And a few months later, it's a complete shock when he's charged with Gail Miller's murder.
Okay, so what did his friends say to the police? It must have been pretty damning.
Well, the Crown prosecutors have built a case that is, at least in part, based on the testimony of his friends. And later at the trial, jurors hear from those witnesses that David talked about killing Gail Miller, that he had blood on his clothes on the day of the murder. that sometime later, his friend found a makeup compact in their car and David grabbed it and threw it out the window. On his lawyer's advice, David doesn't testify in his own defense. On January the 31st, 1970, a year to the day after the murder, a jury finds him guilty in a Saskatoon courtroom. As he hears the verdict, David looks back into the gallery.
I turned around and I saw my father, who was a very big man, and I just seen him look completely weak. And that scared me more than anything else I think I've ever seen in my life.
Back home in the small town of Langenburg, Saskatchewan, Susan is taunted by other kids who call her brother a murderer.
And I actually got very aggressive with them, and my friends were holding me back because I was just really a mess. It's my David. It's my brother. Can't say things like that about him. And then I found out that, he was found guilty that day. So that was when the real nightmare started.
At 17, David Milgaard is sentenced to life in prison. Susan Milgaard is standing on the steps of a penitentiary that shows its age. Stony Mountain originally opened in the 19th century. It sits isolated on a rocky outcrop. It's 1971, and she hasn't seen David for many months. She's still a teenager herself, and she's scared.
When you go through the door to go into the visitation, that's a solid steel bang that happens that just vibrates all through your body. And the same thing happens when he comes into the visiting to see you.
Susan is there with her mother. They're separated from David by a pane of glass, and they take turns speaking to him with the phone handset.
He looked scared. He looked very scared. And he tried to put on a good face, but I could see that he was really scared. He'd already been through a lot. I could see the scar above his eyebrow where I knew he'd been cut. Now I can see the pain and what he's going through, which made it really hard.
And things are hard. All of David's appeals fail. First, the Provincial Court of Appeal, and then the Supreme Court of Canada. He's raped and beaten in prison. He tries to kill himself more than once.
I mean, at this point, he's still very much just a kid. That must have been so hard for his family to feel so powerless in that situation. So how do they find the strength to keep going?
You're right, Falen. I can't even imagine. But the Milgaards always believe in David, and they always maintain his innocence. And Joyce Milgaard, a housewife who had pretty much bet on a life of raising her family in a quiet town, transforms into a fierce fighter for her son, despite the cost.
We had nothing. We had a young family. My husband was working. We were up to our eyes in debts. Buying a home, the regular thing, 3 other children. When this happened to us, no one followed up on David's story. We couldn't afford to get an investigator.
So Joyce takes on part-time jobs to earn money for legal fees, and the family starts its own hunt for clues about who the real murderer is.
My kids have knocked on doors. We've gone through the Saskatoon area. We've played detectives because we haven't had the money to have investigators out.
Okay, but at this point, all of David's legal appeals have failed. What does the family think that they could even do with new evidence?
Well, the family knows that if they can find enough new information about the case, they might be able to persuade the federal government he's innocent. So they tackle this enormous challenge. Susan, for one, kind of takes over at home, while her mother devotes all her time and effort to freeing David.
We all grew up very, very quickly. I mean, I became the cook and the cleaner and the taking care of other things so that she had time to be out working on the case. I was busy working with transcripts and trying to understand law at 15 years old, reading through them, and every aspect of your life is gone. So you have to become strong in order to get yourself through it. It's the only way you can. And if you are going to break down, you just don't do it in front of anybody that you know, your family included, because they need the strength. They can't see the need or the weakness when you're going through something.
Eventually, a reporter starts writing stories about David's case. They're getting a bit of attention. Then Joyce gets a new young lawyer on side. His name is David Asper, and he throws himself into the case, researching, investigating, and then having his own first meeting with his client in prison.
I was super nervous. I did not know what to expect. And I, at the time, was riding a motorcycle, and I had ridden my motorcycle up from Winnipeg to just north of the city where the penitentiary was. And I was sitting in the room with my helmet and my briefcase. In bounded David in his prison garb. And, we quickly shook hands, and he was smiling and happy. And he immediately started giving me a hard time about how awful my helmet looked, because it was all chipped and sort of well-worn, let's say. And we just kind of talked like regular people.
The two Davids are now in this together. They meet to review new evidence that the Milgaard family has discovered. And over time, David Asper sees another side to his client.
I mean, he was rebellious from the very beginning. I mean, and he just took the position that he didn't deserve to be there. Nobody in that system should have any moral or legal authority over him. And he rebelled constantly. He escaped. He was constantly getting into trouble with sort of institutional violations. But the epic moment when I saw this in full bloom was we were trying to get him leave to get out of the prison periodically. And I went to a parole hearing with him. And they started sort of going through all their paperwork about he was a bad boy here, he was a bad boy there, you did this, you did that. And they start listing it all off. And he just looked at them and he just said to them to F off.
By 1988, the Milgaard family's detective work has paid off. Those friends who testified have changed their stories. One, Shorty Cadrain, is found to have visions and mental illness that puts what he said into doubt. They also have fresh witnesses and new analysis from a respected forensics doctor. They think that's more than enough to justify reopening the case, and their lawyers think so too. So David Asper and another senior lawyer named Hirsch Walsh file what's known as an application for mercy, asking the Justice Minister to reopen the case. It's the only avenue they have left. For a long time, they hear nothing back. But Joyce keeps plugging away, trying to uncover more evidence, and eventually a tip leads her to the name of the man she believes really raped and murdered Gail Miller. Larry Fisher lived close to the crime scene. In fact, he lived in the basement suite of the house where Shorty lived. Fisher had other rape convictions similar to this attack. The lawyers send it all to the Justice Ministry as an addendum to their application. Still, nothing.
This is so much work and so much waiting.
It is, and by now, David's actually been in prison for 20 years.
Wait, it's been 20 years?
Yeah, he's now 37 years old. And Joyce, she just can't wait any longer. She finds out that the Justice Minister, Kim Campbell, is coming to Winnipeg, and she decides she'll try to press that forensics report into the minister's hands personally to ensure that she sees it. Joyce tells the media when and where it's happening. And as the cameras roll, she paces the corridor, gripping the file in her hands. Then Kim Campbell steps out of an elevator.
I'm sorry, madam. If you want your son to have a fair hearing, don't approach me personally. I'm sorry. It's quite an. I'm sorry, but I want her son to have a hearing that will withstand scrutiny by the court.
And she kind of just blew by Joyce Milgaard and left her standing there, literally standing there, as the minister's entourage quickly beetled away.
We cannot comment on the substance of the report. Thank you very much.
And Joyce was left alone, abandoned by the Minister of Justice.
Now, in fact, the minister is actually doing the right thing in a legal sense by not talking to Joyce. And as she'll tell a Senate committee much later, in the moment, Kim Campbell says she was befuddled and not wanting to compromise the process. She wonders, what about the people in jail who don't have a Joyce Milgaard to fight for them? In Kim Campbell's words, how do I demonstrate fairness to every person so that I will address everyone's application with the same impartiality? But whatever the minister is thinking in that moment, the nation is watching.
When that happened and it hit the news all across the country, literally that night, whatever public awareness there had been up to that point, it exploded.
Yes, there is an explosion in terms of attention, media coverage, sympathy for Joyce, and by extension for her son. Things start to look brighter as they wait for the minister's decision. But they wait and wait more than 2 years. And then Kim Campbell says no. No to a new trial. No to reopening the case. The family is devastated. David Asper rushes to see his client in prison. David Milgaard is isolated in segregation.
I had to go way down deep inside to the bowels of the prison. He was in a very bad mental health state when I went into the room with him. And I told him I just had to lay it out exactly what happened. I was so morose and so feeling like a failure. And I was sitting across from a broken human being. And an incredible thing happened. As I described the decision of the minister, he perked up. His eyes lit up. He came back into the moment and he exhorted me. He sort of gave me the buck up little soldier speech and said, okay, yet another failure. We trudge on. And when you when you're going through hell, keep going. I came out of that discussion with him saying, all right, we got to turn the jets on here.
But what more can they possibly do? Like, where's there to go? It feels like this family is always at the end of the line.
Yeah, but they do not know how to give up. They actually decide to make a second bid for mercy. And this time, Joyce Milgaard decides to confront the guy at the top, Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. They meet as he arrives in Winnipeg, but he isn't trying to avoid her. In fact, he comes over to Joyce, and she pleads with him to have Kim Campbell reconsider.
Well, I can't speak for her, but I'll be talking to her when I get back. But I'm happy to see you. I hope you're well.
I'm trying my very best.
I know you are. You're working very, very hard. You're very courageous.
Thank you for that.
And I've taken note of your other request. We'll do what we can.
We are just asking for justice.
Okay, so Joyce has made her way all the way to the Prime Minister, and not only that, he sounds really sympathetic to her cause.
Yeah, and it's all caught on camera for the country to see, and that leads to more momentum, more support, and some surprising appearances, like this one on a popular primetime game show.
Tonight, from Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, it's a 35th anniversary edition of Front Page Challenge. Our challenger, Joyce Milgaard.
Front Page Challenge is a CBC classic of another era. Joyce is in the spotlight, standing above and behind a panel of journalists and commentators who are trying to guess who she is. And they figure it out pretty quickly. Then they show sympathy, even support, for Joyce and for David.
Well, actually, he's feeling much better after seeing the interview with the Prime Minister. It gave him a lot of heart. And I'm just concerned that if nothing happens from that, our life has been very much like a roller coaster. You know, we are just up to the top and then just down to the bottom. And it's very difficult for him. He gets very depressed.
I think any parent who hasn't had this experience can't have any idea what you've gone through in the last 22 years, so our sympathies for you, and you've stood up remarkably well, and we wish you well in the future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for being on the program.
So Joyce is just like everywhere now.
She's trying to be, and the David Milgaard case is a national issue. I mean, by now, I'm filing stories on it as a parliamentary reporter. But meanwhile, things are happening behind the scenes at the highest levels of government in Ottawa. Things neither I nor the Milgaards know about at the time. Brian Mulrooney does speak to Kim Campbell about the case, and within weeks, she decides she'll refer the file to the Supreme Court of Canada for its advice. A way, she later says, for the public to see and know all of the evidence. Another twist in the tale.
And we got what we wanted. Time to go to court.
And that's where we're heading in our next episode, to Ottawa and the Supreme Court of Canada, where David Milgaard will finally get his chance to speak to the judges who want to hear him. But there are other big surprises lying in wait.
I got a call that he was missing, he was AWOL. You know, I mean, he has a record of escaping. And so when this happened, there wasn't a lot of love toward giving him any slack.
You're going to want to hear what goes down in court and what happens to David in part 2 of this story. It's available now in our podcast feed. Make sure you share this episode with your friends who might be interested in the messy battles that help define Canada. See You in Court is hosted and produced by me, Falen Johnson. Laura Lynch reported and wrote this episode. Catherine Rolfson is our senior producer. Sam McNulty is our sound designer. Carla Hilton is our executive producer.